Ladies and gentlemen, on the Middle East news, President Donald Trump came out and said that something very positive could happen in the next 2 days. And he was alluding to the ceasefire talks between Iran and US. J.D. Vance, the vice president, also alluded that he has a good feeling of what could happen in the next possible talk. So now, while all this is happening, the stock market rallies phenomenally, and that's largely because good days are possibly ahead. But is it true that good days are ahead? So let me give you the full analysis following this. So Trump has alluded to a possible US-Iran peace agreement within 2 days. Now, again, he speaks in obscurity, vagueness, and hints, and he manipulates the market. But however, I think it's worthwhile to take a look at the current situation because the whole stock market is now rallying in the hope that things will turn out fine. Let's watch on. Well, these are the headlines. Donald Trump said that something could happen in the next 2 days. J.D. Vance, the vice president, said, I feel very good about where things stands, and there are clear signals they are sending out that things could happen in a wonderful, magnificent way. But in the meantime, well, on the Iranian side, I don't see anything positive. So let's not forget, in the last negotiation at Islamabad in Pakistan, the US delegation and the Iranian delegation have a negotiation. They have no agreement, and both sides were pointing finger at each other. And unfortunately, this doesn't turn out well. Well, the good thing out of it is that the Iranian ambassador later did say that the talks lay the foundation for a process. So that's at least some level of positivity that come out from the Iranians. There were 3 sticking points. It's important for us to analyze these 3 sticking points and see whether is it true that something positive can happen out of it. Number 1 is that the US demands a 20-year suspension on nuclear enrichment. 20 years. The Iran said 3 to 5 years. So this is a very far gap. And right now, the US wants the Iranians to surrender the uranium stockpile, let it be fully removed. The Iranians say that no. They are willing to downblend the enriched uranium. Now, downblending simply means that from a near weapons grade uranium, they will dilute it all the way until for commercial purposes. So this is something that is a sore thumb. Now, IAEA, International Atomic Agency, estimated that whatever the Iranian has is enough for 11 weapons, possibly able to wipe out Israel if they really want to, if they become weapons grade. So at this juncture, the Strait of Hormuz is effectively still closed, and the US demand unconditional reopening. The Iranians insist that they have sovereign rights over their territorial waters, and these rights includes the right to collect tolls, collect fees for ships to pass through, as in some sense an indirect way of getting war reparation. There are 3 core sticking points between the Iranians and the US. Number 1, the US demand a 20 years suspension for nuclear enrichment. The Iranians said 3 to 5 years. So between 3 to 5 years and 20 years is really a big gap. Number 2 is actually a bigger one. For the existing uranium stockpile that has been buried under the ground after last year's bombing, the US insists they want full removal of it. The Iranians said, no, you cannot remove it, but we will allow it to be downblended to a commercial grade. So just to let you know what is downblending, the uranium that the Iranians have right now is enriched to a level that is near weapons grade. So it can be used to build 11 nuclear weapons, and most likely the target will be Israel. It will be enough to wipe out the whole of Israel. Now, on the other hand, the Iranians always say that I never have a nuclear ambition to build nuclear weapons. Whether that is true or not, that's also another point that we are not going to dispute on because very highly controversial. But the Iranians say that they are agreeing to dilute it so that it doesn't become weapons grade, it becomes commercial grade. So one side say, I will not give you, but I'll bring it down to commercial grade. The other side say, no, I want you completely remove it. So this is a big sticking point. And the third is the Straits of Hormuz. The US want unconditional reopening. And the Iranians said, I must have the right to collect tolls. I must have sovereign rights over it. And you're not going to pay me for all the damages you have caused for the war. I will collect tolls as a way of indirect way of paying back all these damages. So these are three sticking points. Now, here I want to specifically say about this thing called a security guarantee. So now the US, I'm sure, will say that, Iran, after this peace agreement is signed, I promise not to strike you again, and Israel promised not to strike again. The Iranians know that this is all hot air, right? The words of the president has no weight because he's known to flip and change. So the clear thing that the Iranian wants is also a security guarantee that they cannot strike them again. But how are they going to assure that? So just to be very clear, April 2025 last year, Iran enters a nuclear talk with the US, and both sides call this meeting constructive. Okay, and unfortunately, then there was a strike by the Israeli and the US on them. So this year, while they are still talking again, the US and Israel did a massive air campaign and strike them and killed most of their leaders. And of course, right now, they have been slapped 2 times. So are they going to trust the US again? Well, it's not so easy. So this is now the big gap that they have, a huge distrust. Let me paint to you the story of countries who allow themselves to be disarmed. So this is Libya. Libya in 2003, Colonel Gaddafi, the leader then, surrendered his nuclear program for normalization. 8 years later, NATO bombed Libya and Gaddafi was killed. So you give up your nuclear ambition, that's what happens. In Ukraine, it's even worse. They agreed to the biggest nuclear disarmament, and they give up all their nuclear weapons. And shortly after that, guess what? Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 and later a full invasion in 2022 until now. So they're fighting. Do you know who's the smart one? North Korea. North Korea kept his nuclear weapons despite years of pressure. No invasion of North Korea. Why? Because they have nuclear weapon. Nobody dare to mess around with them. So nuclear weapon is the secret source to defend yourself, to prevent attacks. So if you want to attack me, I will send nuclear weapons at you. So that is why Iran is unlikely to give up their nuclear weapons, because history have told them that those who gave up, they get wiped out. Those who didn't, they survive. So who do you think they will trust? Do you trust the words of Donald Trump or his people, or they'll trust their own nuclear weapons? So if you were to read the Iranian signal, they are not ready to capitulate. So Arachi, which is the foreign minister, he basically said that the US is guilty of maximalism, right? One, the most of their terms, shifting the goalposts, now you put a blockade, right? So Galibat, which is the leader of the Speaker of the House, he said that US failed to gain the trust of Iranian delegation. Of course, they never had the trust. I also don't trust them. So the IRGC warned that the naval vessel near the Straits of Hormuz is a ceasefire violation, but to be frank, they are not firing anything. So satellite imagery confirmed that Iran is reconstituting underground missile bases during this pause. So this 14 weeks is a wonderful time for the Iranians to rebuild their weapons, to rebuild their arsenal, to get ready for a possible war. And to be frank, the Americans are also doing the same thing. They're sending a third carrier over. George Bush, which is a carrier, is sailing at flying speed, coming over to Middle East as well. So everybody is posturing for the possibility if this talk were to fail. Now, the Iranians estimated that the war damages is at $270 billion and insist that there must be the war compensation as a core demand. So right now we have a situation where the United States says everything is positive and the Iranians are basically saying, this is what I want, okay, and I don't trust you. So who's right, who's wrong? So Donald Trump is sending a lot of signals out. In his signal, he basically says, if you were to track what he says from the start till now, 1st of March, he says that, oh, the Iranians want talks, okay? We all know that that's hot air. So 9th of March, he says that the war is very much completed, very much, and then the straits are still closed. They say that Iran is agreeing to all things. In 4 days later, the talks collapse. Then 13th of April, Donald Trump said, I don't care about negotiation, and straight away imposed naval blockade. And then 15th of April, he says that talks could restart in the next 2 days. Can you see how he flips and how he contradicts himself? And yet, he's a very powerful manipulator. He manipulates the market, and we're all celebrating right now as if the whole thing is over. Well, I'll just say this, it is far from over. So let me also deal with this naval blockade that the US is blocking. Well, yes, the intention is good that they want to put pressure on Iran back to the table on US terms. And I think they probably have ships already on the ground positioning. But so far, a lot of ships have flowed through without anything because quite a lot of them are going to China. You think Trump dares to offend China at this point of time? So a Chinese sanctioned tanker just slipped through, not really slipped through. I think 大大方方 openly just go through, plus a few ships. And Wall Street Journal, through their investigation, they found that over the last 24 hours, 20 commercial ships have sailed through the Straits of Hormuz. So the US blockade is clearly a hot air blockade, right? It's not even a soft blockade. It's not even working. I think they're just putting there for show. So again, right, this is the usual Trump nonsense. So we got to be careful when we hear what he says versus what he actually do. As for the mediators, they are working very hard now. Pakistan is really working very hard to see how we can bridge to both parties. And behind them is actually a shadow dancer, right? He's manipulating everything. Well, that's China. China is confirmed involved in the truce negotiation. They are influencing the Pakistani to influence Iran and US, especially on the Iranian side. Of course, China wants this whole thing to end, right? It's not doing China any good. Now, there are talks that the Chinese supply weapons to them. Well, they say no. I hear some rumors that they are probably not supplying hardcore weapons, but maybe supply more simpler weapons such as radar support, satellite support, and things like that. So, well, it's basically something that indicating that the hands of the bigger countries are now involved. Now, just to be very clear, there's a 14-day ceasefire. There are only 6 days remaining.